Hi, welcome to 320 Workshop. Today's video is going to be more examples of the types of things we're going to do here on this channel. I hope to show you how you can turn an inexpensive buy into a nice piece of furniture. My client for this project is my mother-in-law, so I want to do a really nice job. Stay tuned until the end and we're going to talk about the cost, materials, tools, and the time required to complete this project, as well as alternatives or how I would do things a little bit differently. If you want to furnish your home on a budget, doing a refinish might be a great alternative for you. We have a nice little maple nightstand here. Pretty good shape, needs to be refinished, top's kind of scratched up. Color's not desirable. They want the color to be closer to like a cherry. The only thing I can see really, the drawers are fine, but it does rack in the drawer, so got to get that taken care of. So you can see it doesn't really slide back in very well. The bottom shelf is a little bit warped, but I don't think it's enough to try and do anything with. But we'll see what we can do with this. The first thing we're going to start with is to strip this down.
So let's start off by removing the hardware. Now I'm going to use a chemical stripper to remove the varnish and stains. And I'm going to smear this on all over the place. A word of advice is, remember, you need to scrub this on. You're not trying to paint. You want to get in there and really rub it in. It's important to get it everywhere. Now, this is bought at the big box store. It's just a chemical stripper. There's citrus brand or type, and there's regular types. This is just an ordinary old-fashioned, and all of them basically should be wearing a respirator when you're doing this. So you can see after about 15 minutes it began to start breaking up, so I started using a metal scraper and some steel wool. A lot of times people will like to use a plastic scraper, but if you're careful, I think the metal scraper probably does a little bit better job getting it off. So I'm continuing to scrape this off. As you can tell, it's a little bit on the disgusting side, but it's oddly satisfying to scrape off that old finish. As you get farther along, you'll probably want to put more stripper on. So we're going to speed up the process here and get some more of the stripper on. You see it starts bubbling up and you scrape it off. I used both the scraper and coarse steel wool, and then I would also put on the stripper and then kind of wipe it off with mineral spirits as I go to try and clean it up and keep the stuff removed. You don't want it to dry back on there. Now we got all that cleaned up. I'm still going over with a Scotch-Brite pad, trying to make sure I've got everything that I can get off. You want to let this dry. You can tell it still looks a little orangey, but it is still wet at this point. Now you can see after it's dried overnight, there's still some areas where the varnish hasn't come off in the stain. So we're going to use a lot of different types of scrapers and sanding pads to get that out. It's important to get all the varnish off of the little detailed areas. So we're going to use different things, the scrapers like this, sanding blocks. You don't want to stick with sanding paper because you do need to be careful that you don't lose the detail. You could sand it out. There's a number of different kinds of scrapers. Here on the larger areas, I'm using a card scraper, and card scrapers come in different shapes and styles. This one has kind of a concave end on it, I'm able to get around that some. I also found that just using a flat card scraper also works pretty well. So here was a surprise. When I got the stripping done, I found some damaged area. It looks like it was probably done during the turning process, and need to get it all cleaned out so we can figure out exactly how we're going to address this and hide the damage. Then after a lot of scraping, we'll get into a lot of sanding. Sanding a lot of the detailed areas and still going back to a scraper to get out any other little damage or finish left in the corners. Now let's take a look at this drawer. You can see it rocks back and forth. There's just too much room, probably from some wear on the runners and the pieces that hold it straight in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some edge banding. It's a veneer that comes with the adhesive back, and you use it when you're veneering like the edge of a panel. It just very thin, but it actually is going to give us enough room, or take up enough room to make the drawer slide smoother, and it also give a nice smooth edge for it to ride against. Here I'm able to use an iron and just iron this in place. It's a heat sensitive adhesive. It doesn't take a lot to take up that space, and it makes it move just in and out really nice. Very satisfying. If you like what you're seeing, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now this is the fun part where we're getting to put the color back onto the table. I'm using a Mohawk stain called Chianti. It's a nice kind of dark cherry mahogany color, and it's what she wanted. And there's lots of different kinds of stains and brands. There's plenty of different colors. This was just the choice for this one, and I think it was a nice color. You put the stain on, let it set in for a little bit, and then you wipe it off the excess to keep it uniform. Now that I got the color about where I want it, let it dry overnight, I'm going to spray on shellac. Now spraying on the shellac kind of helps put a barrier between the final finish and the color. The color will want to rub off as you put the finish on, so I like to put the shellac on to kind of break that down. It still will come off a little bit, but this kind of prevents a lot coming off. And it's a nice intermediate step. Shellac dries very rapidly, so you can put another coat on within probably about 20 minutes or so. Now you can use shellac as your final finish. It's a good finish that's been around for eons, but it's not necessarily really strong, so I want to put it on General Finishes Armor Seal. I like to wipe it on with a rag, let it rub it in, let it soak for a while, then wipe it off. Take a couple coats. I'm probably going to put about 3 coats on this. You can see I'm purposely feathering it off so it doesn't leave any marks. It really is a nice looking finish, and it takes a little bit of time to dry. But then in between coats, I sand it with a 400 grit sandpaper. Usually use a block like this to kind of keep from digging in anywhere. It's a very light touch, not a whole lot of pressure. And once it's sanded, I'll use a tack cloth to wipe off any fine powders from that. Then after I've tacked it off really good, I go back with another coat. Now if you remember that damaged area on the leg, we're going to fix it with the hard wax. That's the way they had fixed it, and then work well for them, it'll work well for us. Okay, first step is to look through the different sticks of wax and find the color that matches the closest. That's pretty good. Now you put a little bit of this, it's kind of like a soldering iron blade or tool, and you just melt the wax onto that and drip it into the crack until it builds up. And here I'm trying to just kind of push it around a little bit and smooth it out so it fits the contours. You have to be careful because it's hot. I found out a couple different times. Now here you see from a different angle, I'm using just a palette knife that I've heated up with a propane torch to kind of smooth it down and get into that area. You can see it's kind of got a rounded end on that palette knife, so I'm able to get in there a little bit better. Now with that fixed, I want to address this wobble. Probably should have done this earlier on because it drove me nuts the whole time I'm trying to sand and finish it, this kind of rocking. Now a great way to do this is to put it on a very flat surface, take one of the longer legs and hang it over the edge. Now I'm using a ruler so I can mark right where that should lay to be even. Then I'll take it over and use a sander to sand down to that point. It's not a whole lot there, so it's easier and safer to take it down with the sander. A little bit at a time, sneaking up on the right length. And after a couple back and forths, we got it to the right length and all the wobble's gone. And there it is, all finished up and looking good. Ready to be delivered to my mother-in-law. So you can see I polished the brass handle and put a coat of wax on the finish, so it really looks nice now. So let's talk about what it took to complete this project. Here are the materials used. If you had to buy all of these, you'd probably spend $50 or $60, but you'd have plenty of them for other jobs. So I would estimate you probably could get 5 different pieces out of those supplies, and therefore you'd have maybe about $10 of supplies in this job. We paid $75 for this at an antique store, and I spent about 4 hours over a couple days. So for $85 and a little sweat equity, you have a nice heirloom quality piece of furniture you can be proud of. Thanks for stopping by.